You're on.
Welcome back. I hope you had a nice lunch.
We did.
One thing I'd really like to emphasize this weekend is how absolutely, stupefyingly simple all this stuff is. It's not about philosophy, it's not about understanding anything, it's not about saying anything or thinking anything. It's just about feeling the presence of experience, period. And, of course, we're feeling the presence of experience all the time, so it's already a done deal. But feeling the presence of experience with intimacy and with intelligence is powerful and is transformative. And it, by its very nature, communicates that nature. And so simply basking in your own experience, like you're sitting back into a hot tub, occasionally, from time to time, whenever. It's not like, oh, I have to maintain practice being with my experience now. It's like, no. You just relax and have fun and be playful with it. And every now and then, from time to time, you're just like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And just sort of be with this actuality that is here, always, right here, right now. It's always available. Just be with this and feel it and let it show you what it is. Even if it's just a little hit on it and you say, what happened? I don't know. That was weird. Or I didn't see anything. It doesn't matter. You just do that and just feel it. And then just let go about your business, do whatever you like, doesn't matter. And then from time to time again, you just come back and just feel this. And that is, the most powerful practice or process of spiritual transformation, simply feeling experience. So all this other discussion and talking about these aspects and this, that, and the other is just really talking about things that one can notice for oneself about this. And of course, when you notice them about this, you will notice that it's actually not quite like that. It's actually another way that it actually is, which cannot be said. Anything that can be said, what's the sentence go? The Tao that can be told is not the real Tao, or something, when the first words in the Tao Te Ching or something. It's a real conversation stopper, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna start.
What a party pooper.
Okay. Well, I just want to talk about some of my mistakes, my experience, my mistakes, and what I learned, and maybe you can lead me from there. I can't really say so much question. This morning, you started with talking about we live in two different kinds of world. One is conceptual and one is completely intimate, but we're not aware of it. I'm going to go with the thinking part. The thinking. See, I've been seeing this. There's a thought that's going on with thought, and all of a sudden it's transformed to the light, pure light, and it's so intensive. With variations, constantly changing. See, I've been seeing this two kind of word quite often.
Sure. Well, we all
but then I mistakenly feel like, okay, seeing this light is better than normal seeing. And that is a mistake, even though that can help me to soften or losing the grasp of this believing of the thinking.
Well, I'll tell you something about that. I mean, I don't mean to cut you off, but it's a mistake to confuse theory and strategy. Theoretically, it's a mistake because it's all the same. But strategically, in other words, in terms of practicality, at certain points it may be practical to move away from certain kinds of experience and try and move towards other kinds of experience. It's just kind of a remedial experiment or something, But then ultimately, what you discovered there is that you didn't need to do that. But you have to have done that in order to discover you didn't need to do that. So ultimately, it's a mistake. But what's really a mistake is to sit there and insist on theoretical principles when in practice it's not true for you. So in other words, at certain points, you know, there's two aspects in spiritual practice, call it. One is, you know, there's a kind of a, you can think of it as a trajectory, like going up a hill and then coming down a hill. So the first half, the first part, going up a hill, you know, you're extricating yourself from your normalcy, you're extricating yourself from your habitual way of looking at things and exploring novelty, exploring alternatives, exploring other ways of seeing things. But then once you get to a certain point with that, where you have a lot of experience with that, and you've really looked at a lot, and you've really kind of getting into, wow, there's a lot of other stuff going on here. And then that's kind of analogous to going over the top of the hill. And then when you're on the downhill, it's exactly the opposite. Instead of separating from your normalcy, you're actually settling into your normalcy and seeing the way that that is the same as what you discovered. So in the beginning, you're trying to find specialness. And in the second part, you're seeing that specialness that you found is actually what your normalcy is. So you end up where you started in a way. You come full circle. You end up back in complete normalcy, but you've discovered that normalcy is special because you looked for specialness and found it, and then looked at normalcy and saw that normalcy was actually the same thing as the specialness. So you look for the light and you find this amazing, radiant, inconceivable, transcendental light. And then, so that's the first half, but then you're at the top of the hill. So once you really have seen this light and you really know, wow, this is incredible, this is amazing, this is real, then the second half becomes appropriate in practice, strategically. Or is it? I always get strategy and tactics mixed up. Anyway, whatever it is. The second half, you're at the top of the hill and you're coming down. So instead of looking for the specialness, you're looking from the specialness back at your normalcy and looking at, you know, just your personality and your neuroses and you're thinking about things and you're clinging to things and all of that. And you see the way in which that is the same thing as you discovered. And so you end up, you know, back where you started, except it's all transcendental. Because you've proved it to yourself that it is. But you're not just jumping to a theoretical assertion. You know, I've read this book, it's all transcendental, so I don't have to do anything. Well, okay, cool, that's true. But are you really living that? Is that really true for you? And the point is to make it true for you by proving it to yourself to whatever extent you need to. Maybe you can just read it and say, okay, that's true. And hey, more power to you. But for most of us, you know, you need to sort of do the math to a certain extent and really, is this really true? Is this really transcendental? Is there really no self? Is this really, you know, beyond space and time? And then you look and see, yeah, sure enough, it is. And then from that perspective, then, okay, so here's this amazing condition. What about my stupid self and my pathetic neurotic personality and my obsessions and, you know, the fact that I'm a jerk and I'm stuck in my crappy life? And I'm getting old and I don't have another chance and so on and so on. It's like, well, okay. Then you look at that from that perspective and you see it in a new light and ultimately it integrates. So the first half can be thought of as kind of a path of discovery or a path of revelation. And the second half is like a path of integration, where what you discover or the revelation that you have stumbled upon, you integrate that into your actual, real, normal, full actuality.
But seeing through the normal seeing is quite a big challenge, I find.
Yeah, well, it is.
Yeah, it's because the confusion keep showing up, and you keep believing it, and then to seeing what's really happening is also educational too. Like this morning, I was walking, just exploring. I find, you know, I don't have a specific goal to do anything. I just walk, and I just fall into seeing, looking at the intention. There are words I turn this way or turn that way. It's all random, and it was, you don't know where those kind of direction or the point of interest come from. They just show up.
Sure.
And this is very educational tool. You don't know where it's come from. And it's or you can say it's not, I'm not the doer, or whatever. And also, when we, eating lunch or breakfast, whatever, and the thought keeps showing up, and there's some self-criticism and or judgment or whatever, and it's so randomly happening, and you can't control them, but it show up all the time, but like a fragment of things, has no relationship from first thought to the second thought. If I'm just a purely seeing, it's like symphony playing in front of me. But then there's some familiarity of the certain energy that I feel like me, the certain thought triggering some sensations, familiar sensations, or the energy circle, and immediately grasp it. Oh, that's me. That's creating the separation. So I'm just saying that it's kind of some kind of sensitive training to looking at it. Because if I think, okay, I want to let him go, it's not something you can really let him go, but when you really see it, and it's, oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And you start loosening up.
Yes, exactly. It's all about seeing. It's not about changing anything. Seeing is what affects the letting go, not doing any actual letting go. Because actually, the letting go that's important, the letting go that's powerful, is letting go of wanting to let go. Letting go of letting go. So when you don't need to let go anymore, that's when you let go. So, which is affected by seeing. You see what it is, and you see, oh, this wacky personality showing up, doing all these silly tricks, and creating separateness and coming down on itself and all this stuff. And it's like, how weird, how bizarre that should be showing up. And you see the way in which that just doesn't matter, because it's not actually different than anything else. It's not actually different than the wind in the trees outside, or what thought pops into your mind, you walk left or walk right.
It's very difficult to drop in that kind of sense of.
Yeah, but you don't need to drop it. You don't need to drop it. You don't need to not be you. Just keep seeing the light, and eventually that will come clear to you.
This is my second coming over here to hear you talk, and I was wondering if you have any kind of a suggestion as to how we listen to you.
Oh, that's a great question. I'm not sure what the answer is, but it's a great question. Now let's see if there's a good answer. I would say with engagement and with sincerity, and not too rationally. Or, be rational by all means, but don't insist on just being rational. Be open to just whatever other flavors are present. An interesting aspect of all of this is that this actuality is fundamentally an irrational event. Everything about what this is and the way that it is what it is irrational. It makes absolutely no sense. And all of our human rationality and our logic sort of skips over that. And yet all of that logic exists because of the irrational nature of this. Experiencing makes no sense. You can't say how you're doing it or what you're doing or what it is or anything about it. It's just completely beyond analysis. And yet it is complex, it is nuanced, it is intelligent, it is profound in just so many ways. And communication like this is like that too. It's easy to think, oh, we're here and we're talking words to each other, but there's much, much more than that going on. There's experiencing going on, there's flavors, there's moods, there's body language, there's all kinds of things. And most of it, you know, in fact, actually all of it is basically irrational. So just, the main thing is to just be engaged and not need it to make a lot of sense. Not expect it to not make sense, but just don't worry too much about trying to follow it too carefully. And this following, it's fine. That's, you know, it's not a matter of being anti-intellectual, but just being sort of like a full range of engagement in all sorts of modes, many of which may be poetic or musical or whatever, you know. Multidimensional. Which is not special to what's happening here. It's really just a microcosm of what experience always is. So it's a foretaste of being with your experience multidimensionally, which we always are anyway. But again, we typically don't let ourselves notice that because typically we're so often biased in favor of our logic or our analysis or, you know, thought, what have you.
Would you could you expand on something I wrote? Because what we are is not dependent upon what we see in the world.
Yeah. What this is not dependent on what it looks like. Being is not dependent upon what seems to be happening.
Being as in?
Actuality. You know, you could say the isness of the moment. That sounds like an abstraction, which is absurd because it's the most concrete thing there is. The only concrete thing there is the isness of the moment. And yet you say the isness of the moment, it sounds like, what? Because again, the isness of the moment is irrational. But the being of the moment is independent of what seems to occur. You know, the roof could all of a sudden collapse right now, and the being of the moment wouldn't change one tiny bit. The moment would still be, right? Or Jesus Christ could all of a sudden show up in the room in lights and it would be the second coming and the rapture would start, right? And the being of the moment would still just be the being of the moment. So the being of the moment is not dependent upon what appears, what seems to be appearing experientially within it, so to speak. I try to sum this up. I have a sort of catchphrase you've probably heard in passing, radiant presence. To me, presence, you know, radiant presence is a kind of a metaphor. It's not literally true, but it's a way of referring to the two poles of what this is. This is presence, right? Experience is present, the isness. You know, it's again, we talked about this a little briefly this morning. It's undeniable that this is present, even though you can't pin down exactly what it is or how that is, but nonetheless, it's just self-verifyingly obvious that that's the case. So there's this presence, and the nature of the presence is always to look like something, and that's the radiance. So, so in terms of your issue you were interested in, the presence is not affected by what the radiance looks like.
So the nature of the presence is always to look like something. So
Yes, that's the radiance. It never shows up naked. The emperor always has clothes, so to speak.
But that something, I'm just, the only way I can do is just like to try to wrap my mind around it.
Sure.
For starters.
Well, look at it within your own experience. I mean, like right now, you're seeing something and you were seeing it at 10 o'clock this morning, right? Just the colors and lights specifically that you're looking at are different, right? Slightly maybe, but they're different. And yet, the presence of the moment is exactly the same, right? At 10 o'clock this morning, it was here, now, and now it's here, now. It's not a different here, now. Here, now hasn't changed, but what it looks like has changed. So what it looks like is continually changing, and in fact, it's unresolvable. Even as it always looks distinct in the moment, you can't even say what it looks like because it's already changed to something else. It's so slippery, it's so fast. But the presence doesn't change at all. Right? It's absolutely always here now, always, precisely. With, you know, when you were 1 year old, it was here now, exactly like it is now. It just hasn't wavered. It's completely unwavering. And yet it always looks entirely different, never repeats. So what it is not affected by what it looks like. It's not a change, it's not increased, it's not decreased, it's not improved, it's not diminished. It's, it's inviolable, it's stainless, it's, they have this wonderful word in Tibetan, which is dorje, which means diamond, which refers to it's just completely impregnable, completely invulnerable.
And that's what you're calling the present moment? Or
Sure, just call it presence.
present?
But distinguishing it as presence is irrelevant because it's not actually a separate component. It's just what this is. But what this is not dependent on what it looks like. It can look like anything. It looks the way it happens to look, but it always is exactly this. And it never changes from this. It never becomes something else. It has never been anything else ever in your entire experience, and it never will be.
Because maybe where I'm getting bogged down is one thing that you were saying is always changing. It's never the same.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm hearing here is it's unchanging. So
What it is unchanging. What it presents as is continually changing. And what it is can't be found. It's transcendental. It's best not to try and wrap your head around this stuff.
I know.
It's not that what I'm saying isn't true, but the way that it is true is completely beyond the way it's being put. It's completely beyond the words. Like I use this phrase radiant presence, and it's meaningful. There's this presence, and it looks like something. I mean, that's a given. It's always here now, and it looks like something, right? I mean, that's just what experience is. And yet there's not two things. The presence is the appearance is the presence. And yet the presence doesn't change and the appearance does, which makes it seem like they're separate, two different things, but you can't find one apart from the other, and you can't find the other apart from the one, so they're the same thing. So it's just weird. I mean, just once you get that it's completely irrational, makes no sense, and the fact that it's self-contradictory is no problem, because it's not something that makes sense. You can say it is A, and you can say it isn't A, and they can both be true, and neither of them can be true. Because what this is, in the way that it is, that cannot be said. It just cannot be said. So all of these ways, hopefully artful ways I'm talking about it, are basically completely wrong. They're not true per se. They are hopefully useful, or at least interesting as jumping off points, but they aren't finally true in themselves. They're like expedient tricks to facilitate engaging with this as it actually is. It's in your own direct experience that you find this, not in the words of someone else.
Yeah, and that leads into something I was wanting to ask you about, which is, if all this stuff, defies conventional analysis and logical approach and all that kind of stuff, yeah, it's a trick, the presence showing up as something else, but it can be felt.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
right.
Because feeling is illogical. Feeling is not a rational process.
Right.
Feeling is completely irrational.
Yeah.
It's like irrational.
Yeah, irrational,
Yeah.
trans-rational. Let's make up some words.
Well, no, it just shows up,
Yeah.
shows up like that way, just sort of nakedly.
Yeah. When you get that nothing in your experience has ever made any sense, it all becomes very simple. What sense does color make? What sense does the presence of light make? It just is, and it's completely obvious and palpable.
Mhm.
And it's a no-brainer. It's absurdly obvious, and yet it's completely beyond words. You can't say what it is. You can't say how it happens. You can't say what light is. And yet here it is. It's completely self-evident. It's even stupid that it is what it is, and here it is, and yeah, duh.
Mhm.
And yet that is beyond rationality. Beyond rationality is not as fancy as it sounds.
Well, isn't it, and isn't that things like the irrationality or the paradox, that's the point of view of that other world, the consensus-based world?
Yeah, exactly.
Where it appears as paradox.
Exactly. It's irrational from that point of view, and it's paradoxical from that point of view. In itself, it just is what it is. It doesn't know from paradox or irrationality. It's just business as usual.
Yeah.
It's just reality.
I think you had a really good thing you said on one of your Satsangs, which was like, that, like the question, is it a wave or a particle? Yes. You know, it's like, yeah, that.
Yeah. I mean, this is what it is, and what it is very simple, and here it is, so how about it? I mean, that's the simple. So all the rest of all the words and all the complexity and all the thises and that's and the complexity and it's this, that's just a lot of bullshit and has nothing to do with it. Here it is. Check it out. And you're already checking it out, so you don't even need to check it out, just notice you're checking it out. Let yourself trip on it. You know, again, you're already tripping on it, so let yourself trip on tripping on it. Again, you start talking about it, and you start tying yourself in knots. You don't talk about it, and here it is, and it's nothing to say.
Yeah, you can tie yourself into knots by talking about it, but you don't tie yourself into knots by feeling it.
Yeah.
At least that's my experience.
Exactly so. This is all about feeling. This is not about figuring anything out.
Because the feeling is like it's direct, it's not subject to
Yes.
interpretation. And,
Yeah. This is all about feeling. This is all about texture. Experience is a textural presence, and just feeling that the texture and the lusciousness and the richness and the multidimensionality of this texture.
And yet, kind of feeling is also sounding a little bit like six blind men about an elephant.
Exactly. So it's that too, for sure. But again, that only becomes an issue when they try and describe it. When they're just feeling it, it's just a feeling. But as soon as they try to describe it in a metaphor, is when it becomes all these different things.
It seems like, although it's non-conceptual, there is a knowing, a non-conceptual knowing in that feeling.
Absolutely.
That has meaning.
Yes, absolutely. The feeling is hyper-intelligent.
Yeah.
You know, it's a mistake to include, to suppose that intelligence requires rationality or analysis. Just feeling, just engagement with experience is an exercise of profound intelligence, but it's a nonverbal intelligence, an intuitive intelligence, if you will, if you want to classify it. But I mean, and you can look at this, it's very self-evident, and you may not be used to thinking of it this way, but for example, every instant, your consciousness effortlessly sees every single bit of light that's in your field of vision. Bang, like that, with no process. It's not like you need to say, wait a minute, let me see, oh, there's some black there, and there's some orange there, and wait a minute, oh, there's some green there. It's not like that, right? Just bang, instantly, your intelligence, your consciousness assimilates all of this color that's there in the instant, no processing time at all. I mean, that's a serious exercise of intelligence. You know, that level of intelligent engagement is occurring. So experience is already a hyper-intelligent activity. It's not a rational intelligence, it's not an analytical intelligence. And, you know, because of our bizarre human mind structure bias, we may be used to devaluing that or not thinking of that as intelligence. And you know, if I'm not thinking about it as non-intelligence, but that's all asked backwards. Because I think the real powerful intelligence is this intelligence that experiencing is, which is the same intelligence that's running your metabolism and so on and so forth.
It seems like in addition to intelligence, there's also meaning. And to me that's very profound.
I agree completely.
There's a meaning that doesn't have to be confirmed.
I agree completely.
Self-confirmed meaning.
Yeah. I mean, to me, and you know, it's discoverable that intelligence, form, meaning, purpose are all essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
And this is an incredibly, you know, puissant embodiment of all of that. It just is that. That's what it is. That's what's doing it. That's what it's made of.
And the yes, the meaning is non-conceptual, but it's very real in a sense, you could say it's a felt meaning.
Yeah, it's very palpable, it's obvious. You know, I mean, in fact, I think that we put a lot of effort into trying to translate that perceived meaning into verbal terms when we're trying to talk about how we feel or something, or describe it. You see a sunset that's beautiful, and you're trying to talk about it. It's like trying to translate a felt obviousness that's completely irrational and yet palpable into well, it's, you know, it was just exquisite and there was a lovely purple, and it's like, you know, that's so beside the point. The point is just the richness of the event itself is just, it's explicit.
And it seems to me that in that richness and in that felt sense of meaning, that felt sense, there is really, there's a blurring of boundaries.
Sure.
There's a dissolution in a sense of the subjective and objective.
Yeah, all that. Because again, boundaries and subjective and objective and all those are kind of applied to the continuity of experience, essentially by conceptual intelligence to various degrees.
And not to get hierarchical, but it actually feels kind of cool.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of nice.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
No, noticing this is great. You know, again, as humans, in terms of the normal human mode of functioning, we seem to have a real strong bias towards sort of conscious functioning and conscious identification. And just noticing and appreciating these unconscious modes is really integrating. I mean, it's vivifying, because of course the unconscious modes and the conscious modes aren't actually contrary. They aren't actually antagonistic, even though they're very different. And because we're so biased typically in favor of the one and ignoring the other, just noticing the other is kind of, you know, giving the opposition equal time or something. And it's for sure, it's a path of integration.
But by unconscious mode, are you referring to the kind of felt sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all these modes that are basically non-verbal, they're indescribable.
Yeah.
They're not a product of analysis or a product of description. They're a product of felt qualitative presence or something. Yeah. I mean, you know, again, you start trying to describe it, and it sort of gets more complex than it need be, because it's in the nonverbal actuality, it's so obvious and clear and palpably what it is.
I remember one time you were asking the question, where is your bubble of your experience floating at or sitting on?
Sure.
That's how I feel right now.
Yeah.
This bubble experience, and it's all.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really fun exercise. Here's your experience. Here it is, right here, right? Just look at it. Here it is. You know, this is your field of vision is floating here. Your field of sensation and touch is floating here. Your field of hearing is floating here. Your field of thought is floating around wherever it is, and all these different textures and flavors of your experiences here. Where is here? What's it sitting on? What's it sitting in? What space is it in? What space does experience happen in? You know, and in other words, what actuality is this actuality in? Is it in a context, or is it just bootstrapped up out into itself? You know, it can be really, really fun to try to just sort of feel that, you know, because it's, again, consensus reality, we're used to thinking, well, there's the objective world out there, and it's really there, and it's really heavy, and it's really big. And so my experience is just this little thing here with that big, massive thing out there. But when you look at what's actually here, you see the objective world is just an abstraction of the presence of your own sensory fields, which are just floating right here. And where are they? Where are they floating? They're floating right here, but where is here? You know, relative to what? In what?
I'm reminded of your earlier thing when we were little, and it's, what the fuck is this? And that feeling of just letting that unanswerable question sit there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, it's delightful. I mean, this is all question mark. This is all mystery, you know, and that is a lusciousness. That is actually a fullness, you know. in our normal human mode of wanting resolution and wanting answers, that feels like a conundrum, but actually that's a solution. Mystery and question mark is an absolute fullness.
And within this totality, all the person, it doesn't seem like what we think it is anymore. It's just different.
Sure.
The texture, the flavor. It's not like we normally think of a person.
Sure.
You've talked about a few times about what you can verify from your own experience,
Mm-hmm.
and also about the fact that we've been completely brainwashed so that we have incorporated a lot of what is unverifiable and think of it as verifiable. How do you negotiate that for yourself?
Well, however I do. I mean, I don't particularly.
So there's nothing really verifiable or
It's not, no, this is what it is, and this is the way it is, but it deals with itself, so there's no negotiating that needs to happen. There's no, functioning happens within the context of the presence of experience, and functioning is ultimately mysterious, as experience is ultimately mysterious. So mystery functions within mystery. So it's not like it needs to be resolved as anything or to be verified as anything.
so you don't need to figure out where the line is between what you can verify from your own direct experience, like you exist but other people don't.
Oh, no, because nothing is verifiable per se, so there's all these possibilities floating around and they're all viable.
Got
And ultimately they don't need to be verified. I mean, for example, I do these talks and it doesn't really matter to me whether or not you all actually exist, because the talks are meaningful in themselves as a dance, as an artistic engagement and exploration of whatever, right? Of whatever this is, and that stands on its own, and I can parse it as you're probably really there, and this may be of some benefit to you, and if so, that's great, and that feels good. Okay, cool. Or maybe you're not there at all. Maybe this is like a dream, and this is just an enactment, but it's still an enactment of what is meaningful to me, and in that sense, it's meaningful and cool. So it's not like it needs to be one or the other. It doesn't matter, and all functioning is ultimately like that. There's all sorts of possibilities. You can hold it as being made. Well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but that's really irrelevant to the actual functioning. I'm hungry. I go find food and try and find food I like, and try and avoid food I like less. And that doesn't matter whether the food actually exists or anything. It just, nonetheless, it can happen like that, just as a natural, unfoldment, because every element of that functioning, it doesn't matter what it actually is, or even whether it actually is. I can function perfectly well in a dream, or not. Whether or not I know it's a dream, whether or not I'm thinking it's actual, it's irrelevant, because functioning or lesser or dysfunctioning just happens anyway. I mean, I function in this waking state, and sometimes I dysfunction in this waking state. I was in a little car accident a couple of days ago, and I screwed up. That can happen, right? It doesn't matter whether the cars actually existed, or whether this is a dream, or whether this is an objective world, or whether, because all of that is just, that's just philosophy, really. Because functioning is ultimately, you could call it just direct energy presence, whatever that is.
So that nobody knows the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. When you die and the lights go out and the experiences, does that energy just dissipate? And then, energy continues all the time, I know, but.
There is no energy.
There isn't.
What this is beyond space and time, and so of course it doesn't matter. But me saying that doesn't mean anything. The best I can say is you'll see. But don't be surprised if it's the same. Or be very surprised, that could be fun.
So what this is beyond space and time, but we are in space, this body.
No, body's not in anything. Body appears as if it was in space and time. You're not the body. When you dream, there's a new space, right? The space in your dream isn't this space, it's some other space. It wasn't there until you dreamed, and all of a sudden it's there. So space is a result of consciousness, not the other way around. And then when you're dreaming, you can seem to have a body in that space. Right now you seem to have a body in this space. When you go to sleep, where does this space go? When you go to sleep, where does this body go? And then you start dreaming, and there's maybe another space, maybe another body. You know, bodies and spaces come and go, but this doesn't come and go. It can look like anything, but it never becomes anything other than exactly this. And look, you know, just play with it. Look for yourself. You know, it's not a matter of, you know, great assertions or aphorisms or aspirations. It's just check it out. You know, it's just it's pretty. When you let go of your preconceptions, experiencing is a pretty amazing thing.
So here's another intellectual blah blah. The state of identification, you know, being identified with something, being identified with
Sure.
my idea, with my feelings.
Sure.
Just elaborate.
Identification is one of the dominant modes of reality. Reality generates identifications very spontaneously and very fluidly.
Which reality?
There's only one reality.
Oh.
This actuality.
Okay, then say that again, because I was thinking you were going
But
Identification.
identification is one of the natural modes. Where does identification come from? It's the nature of this to generate identification. And just as it's the nature of this to generate apparent degrees of systems that identification can occur in terms of. So this generates apparent bodies, and it can generate apparent identification with those bodies. This generates apparent personalities and can generate apparent identification with those personalities. And all this is very flexible. It's much more fluid than you may be used to noticing. You may be identifying with your body, but all of a sudden you're watching a TV show, or you get caught up in a daydream, and all of a sudden, where'd your body go? You're not noticing it went anywhere.
Well, then I'm becoming identified with what I'm watching.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe so, or maybe not. But identification is a fluid quantity which comes and goes. It's very much related to, or perhaps an aspect of, if that was even meaningful, the focus of attention, which likewise, it's the nature of what this is, of experience, to spontaneously generate a focus of attention, or let's say foci of attention, because it tends to generate many, and they're not mutually exclusive. But you'll notice that there's always some degrees of focus of attention. It just shows up. You're not doing it on purpose. You may, again, through identification, you may feel like you're doing it on purpose.
No, it really just does happen.
Yeah. Oh, so there's all of
And
these.
I think there's a part of me that thinks, well, that's, you know, we don't want to be identified.
No, that's a fallacy. And again, that's related to what we were talking about a little earlier with the different strategies that apply at different phases of your process. At certain phases of your process, it may be useful, if you're used to being identified, it may be useful to explore aspects of your experience that are outside of identification. But then at another point of your process, when you have a lot of familiarity with aspects that are outside of identification, it may be useful to look back at identification and see what's there. Because ultimately, identification and say non-identification are the same thing. And that's what's powerful to see. Not that one is bad and one is good and you're trying to get from the bad to the good.
Yeah. Yeah, holy cow, that boggles my brain.
But particular identifications are so strong, right? Isn't it really valuable to tease it all apart for a little while and
Absolutely.
then it's a little bit softer?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be valuable. And it's always valuable to look at what's going on. And the nature of identifications is that they tend to blind one. It tends to induce a kind of a tunnel vision or show up as that. And so in that context, it can be useful to sort of deconstruct it But ultimately, that doesn't mean that identification per se is the devil or is bad or should be avoided. But it certainly can be understood and can be experienced as it actually is, as an inherent aspect of something that is completely beyond it. So what this is beyond identification, and what this is doing identification. It shows up as identification, and it also shows up as non-identification, or let's say lesser identification. And the trick is to explore all the aspects of that.
But the pain is in being strongly identified, and then the liberation is in playing with identification, right? Yeah,
because when you discover that identification is no big deal, it stops being painful. It's just arbitrary. It turns out to be, it's like what show is on TV. It's like after a while, who cares?
Wow.
Because again, it's the tendency of this to manufacture an identification. This, this sometimes can sit in sort of relatively non-identified modes, but most typically, it will tend to churn out, it will tend to generate an identification. It gets fixated on itself and zooms in on something, and once it does that, it has a tendency to have that show up as a kind of identification. I mean, again, you can't say precisely what that is or how it works, but you can play with it and you can discover for yourself that it's just an aspect. I mean, any particular is an aspect of everything. So identification is an aspect of everything, much of which is beyond identification, and so on and so forth. And so the trick is to play with that and discover.
Can you mention this? I know you've done this probably hundreds of times, but can you mention a trick or two to break up those really strong, persistent identification? Like I have fun playing with the experience of reality in all sorts of ways and whatnot, but like physical pain, strong emotions, they're so recurrent. It's like
right.
I can break up all the little stuff, but how do you break up the really persistent fixations?
Well, one way to break them up is don't worry about it, because time will do it for you. Whatever is happening will not be happening before long. So, as a general strategy, I recommend doing exploration, doing experiments where it's easy. And when you're in an intense identification or intense pain or something that you're really locked into, it typically is not easy. That's like the worst case. And so you can do experiments with that if you have the wherewithal to do so. But typically that's the most difficult, because by nature you're the most locked in and the least inclined to have freedom to explore alternatives. So it's best strategically to, when you're really swamped, when you're really lost in identification or pain or intense emotion or something, just give up. Run up the white flag and just say, hey, I've lost this round. Because sooner or later, and probably sooner than you'll expect, you'll find all that dissipating and something else will be going on. And that's when your opportunity is. So when you're sort of in between things, when things are lighter, when things are more open, that's when you typically will have a greater ease and more facility at being able to run little experiments, sort of just play with your experience in various ways. And the powerful point is, anything you discover in these easy modes, or these easy intervals, cumulatively will apply ultimately in the more identified intense modes. So the more experimentation, the more experience you have playing with your experience and tripping on it, so to speak, when it's easy, will actually be freeing you even when it's not easy in the long run. So it's not like well, I've done it when it's easy, now let me do it when it's hard. It's not like you have to do this and then do this. And if you do it anywhere, it applies everywhere. So what you find anywhere applies across the board, which is why it's the most efficient to do it where it's easiest, because you won't be, unless you really are sort of a glutton for whatever achievement or something. I went out there and I found my worst identification and greatest pain, and I really,
Well, the way it shows up for me is I seem to have this fixation with pain, so even when I'm trying to, just look at just light stuff or whatever, I'm just so obsessed with the pain that it just always comes into.
Well, okay, you can. I mean, if it's an issue if it's a big thing in your life, then you can. Pain is very interesting. And what you do with stuff like that is the opposite of looking for something else. You go right into it. So when pain is present, look at, well, what is present? Don't call it pain. Don't even think of it. Just feel I'm feeling something here that I'm calling pain. Let me just suspend that I'm calling it pain. It's not that you need to stop calling it pain. Just like, okay, I'm calling it pain, cool, that's that. Then what is it that's actually here? What is it? Something is experientially present that I'm calling, that I'm designating as this. And just explore it. Explore it by textural presence. Feel what it is. What is it that is here? And just let yourself feel it experientially, non-verbally. Just feel the texture of it. Feel what's its texture, what's its shape, what's its color, what's its, I mean, not literally by asking those words, but just sort of as if it was a mysterious thing that is present all of a sudden from some other dimension, and you wonder, wow, what's this that just showed up? And you're sort of checking it out, just like scientifically, unbiasedly, just like feel, what is here? What is it that's here? And with pain, it's very easy to, in my experience, it can be very easy to discover that what's there has a lot more going on and a lot different going on than we usually think. One thing that I noticed in my own experience about pain is reified by sort of holding it at a distance. Mm-hmm. Like I get a toothache or something, and I'm like, oh, I have a toothache, it's horrible, I'm trying to stay away from it. But by staying away from it, I'm actually not looking at it and locking onto it. It's like, oh, it's there. I'm sort of holding it away as hard as I can, and while being intensely fascinated by it, but I'm not actually being with it. I'm being with like a cartoon version of how horrible it is. But if I like, okay, it's horrible and it's pain, groovy, take that as a given, then you sort of slip under that or slip around that, and well, what is it that's here? And you just go all of a sudden feel it right away. And pain is very interesting because you discover it's almost like a flame. It's very dynamic, and it has a lot of dimension and texture. And I mean, it has a lot of aspects that are not at all painful. There's a lot of very weird experiential components, I mean, you may find. And again, so in doing so, again, you discover that, wow, I just thought this was just this dull pain that was just the way it was, and I was sitting there and I was hitting it. And I'm discovering that, wow, it's this whole rainbow of weirdness, a lot of which isn't even painful at all.
It even can turn into pleasure if you can just pull apart this overlay of the body.
Exactly so. And you don't even need it. It's not a matter of deconstructing or dismantling the body. It's just a matter of sort of bypassing it. Yeah, okay, it's a body. Okay, it hurts now. Let me just sort of be with what's here.
It's interesting because, I just talked about the other kind of emotional pain, but I never get Novocaine, and I never get Novocaine because I hate the numbness. I'm not afraid of the needle, but I've really learned that when I feel the pain, I just go with it. I really don't resist it. I just feel it.
Yeah.
And it's really not hard at all. I know it's going to end, and it's really an easy thing. So I'm going to try to apply it to the other pain I have and really look at that.
Yeah, emotional pain.
Being like a flame.
Emotional pain is distant, is difficult because it's typically a gestalt of all kinds of things that are going on at once, I think. There's a narrative, and there's a conceptual aspect, and there's all sorts of things, and there's a reaction to projections, and sort of this whole constellation of complexity. Physical pain in a way is a little easier because aside from the resistance, it's just what it is. But you're right. I mean, I think resistance is a huge part of what makes pain pain. It's that pushing it away. It's that pushing it away that actually locks you into it, and actually solidifies it and stabilizes it. Because pain is not actually stable. Pain, the instantaneous experience of pain is very, it goes all over the place. I used to be a complete coward. I mean, most of my life I was just terrified of pain. I hated it. I didn't like to get shots. I mean, I was a real wimp. I was just a complete wuss. And then I got cancer. About almost 20 years ago now. Wow, time flies. And And all of a sudden you're getting all these tests and they're cutting into me and poking me and all this. And my pain threshold just went, it's like, that doesn't hurt, you know, come on, poke, you know, do me more, you know. Your whole, you know, it's all these relative standards of, you know, it's a sort of dread and holding away and distancing that turns pain into something and can make the tiniest little pain this great horror, you know. But if you were fortunate or unfortunate enough to have circumstances that expose you to more severe pains, it recalibrates your whole scale, and you can get a whole different sense of what's up in it.
What inspired me to do it is I was really trained of dentists, and I was a dental assistant for a while, and I saw little children come in, and we would work on them with, you know, Novocaine. And they weren't conditioned to be, you know, some were fearful, but a lot of them would just kind of fall asleep in chairs when we were working on it. And I thought, wow, there's something there.
Yeah, for sure. No, nothing to fear but fear itself is profound. You know, it's really true. We create these things and it becomes a self-fulfilling thing. Because we dread it and because we're holding it away, it becomes more actualized than it actually is. So it's very slippery. It's all very weird. I mean, you know, we haven't dwelled on it that much today. Maybe tomorrow we'll talk about it more. But the, you know, it's really striking how powerful the sort of hypnotic and the auto-suggestive and the suggestive mechanism is in terms of how experience structures itself and what it seems to be. You know, like this whole distancing yourself from pain and resistance and all that. It's all basically these kind of hypnotic stances that then create sort of its own self-fulfilling actuality. And generally, the experience itself is not that cut and dried, and isn't that way at all. I mean, it's the same way we create a consensus reality, the same way we create being stuck in our normalcy. It's all bootstrapped out of nothing, out of fantasy, by basically hypnotic, you know, means. Why don't we take 5 or 10 minute break and stretch a bit? You know, I know this can be grueling. The first day of these the 2-day events is usually the hard one. Tomorrow will be big fun. We'll be dancing around singing Hare Krishna.
Guru first.
I'm hoping so.
Guru first.
I gotta go stand up.
Yeah, me too.
All universities actually about 8 hours. Yeah.
Some beverages will come. Chai's coming.
No, I can't mistake the whole thing. I know what I'm looking at. Yeah, I don't care. I think my wife is gonna come with.
At the time, I wasn't so much into it. It was sort of like, oh, I think this is better. But actually, it's a lot.
Yeah, and so I just, I'm raising these things.
There's much of it. So the oldest is, you know, they're holding to, you really are. But that sort of younger is looking at it and saying, no, it's nothing measurable, you can't, you know, it's just, it's probable.
Yeah. But you know, I think it's really true that most of the physics, most of the science, most of our culture has never really come to terms with it's just still pretty much ignored. The fact that you couldn't say whether
So like interpersonal
also,
They're big enough to drive.
Huh?
It's like super good brand. Instead of buying device, that's all.
You know, I don't know.
When I did
I know that feeling when I don't want to do something, something goes with it.
Right, you can go, you can go. Instead of, I don't know, right?
It's really important.
Yeah, I do. And it's easy.
And
I just started to do this. Satsang training. Yeah, it's really great. Because you're basically it's not hard.
Like, I think that like some of the people who experience it, but doesn't fit. So for the most part, it's just
There's something called R-square, when you run a clinical experiment, you always have at the end of the research, that R-square is absolute. The R-square is the total amount of variance.
yeah.
And to get the R-square above, at least in the social world, to get it above, like 25 or 30 is really, even if it's you can't get it all. You're just, you're just sort of talking about something.
Yeah.
Create.
Yeah.
But I say that's my knowledge. I'm good.
This is the first time. Couple years since
We went to the course. Actually, a couple courses that I teach. And then, you guys understand the framework on these models are. These labels are things I was talking about, and I say. So don't take offense to that. One of the stuff that exists. Pretty the basics are talking about. And at first they don't like humans. After a while they start to release seeds of insight. Conversation.
You're just like starting to be.
Going through every course teacher and trying to figure out what works. And then the last time, I'm not the editor.
Pretty target practice in that field, and you really get down to the actual say, for example, like I used to do MRI work, okay, so when they take these pictures come up in color, and based upon the colors, they're telling you what's going on. But the colors are arbitrary. The colors are arbitrary. And what they're measuring is an arbitrary measure by which they say you will make that next. But in the depths of it,
They always try to say they don't want to do. You're right.
but then they'll talk about the one day they're talking about previous. As long as you have a picture, then for that, you have
It's so nice to get together and break those.
caffeine or
I just remember when we were in Italy, and we were all like slugging out of the same bottle of water all the time, and you had.
I know I sprained my ankle.
You got really sick with Cinque Terre. Is that where we were? Yeah, because I remember you and I over the beach, and it was just like,
Oh, I do.
I was like, oh, we're gonna get in this cold water, and I was like, get into a fucking bath.
And I floated.
And you floated for the first time.
I do remember.
Yeah.
That was no fun.
Yeah, no, I
So we're back.
Peter, did you say something about that there's no such thing as energy?
Sure.
Okay, so let me just ask, when I go into a room, there is a felt experience of being drawn to a person's energy or feeling what I would call negative energy. I mean, it's like you don't even have to say anything. So what's happening?
What is happening? What do you think's happening? When you're just feeling that, what do you think's happening? Can you say?
Okay, so what just came to me is, what's the word? I'm making, oh shit, what's that word? I'm making an interpretation.
Sure.
Is that what is?
Sure. I mean, energy is a theory. Energy is creating the notion of a thing that is energy, that is X, Y, Z. And as with anything, with any actuality, when you're looking for a thing that is energy, that is X, Y, Z, you find something that is other than that. So it's not energy, what is it? And you might come up with another theory. Well, if it's not energy, maybe it's, maybe it's consciousness. So then, okay, so consciousness, what is consciousness? Consciousness is something that has such and such properties. And you go looking for that, and you don't find that either. I mean, arguably, the most peculiar aspect of this is you can't find anything. You can't find anything. And what do I mean by energy? Let me try and be very precise. What exactly am I referring to when I say sensing? And all of a sudden, well, and you can't say. It's not nothing. It's not like it's negated or it's a simple, it vanishes in a puff and all of a sudden it's like plain vanilla or something. But you can't find what it is other than this. Other than the non-verbal, completely non-conceptual, non-specific, yet totally specific actuality. I mean, it's just weirder than weird.
It actually seems like we negate stuff by putting phrases like that on there.
Well, of course, we negate the richness and non-linearity that it actually is by substituting these caricatures of specifics on them. We do that with everything. We do that with ourselves. We do that with our lives. I'm Peter Brown and my characteristics are X, Y, Z. It's like, really? my life is such and such, really? And when you go looking at what's actually there, you just find this very weird, amazingly luscious continuum of inconceivability and undescribability that does not conform to being anything you can say it is. So, I mean, we're continually faced with this problem. Words don't refer to specific things. Words are indicators of actuality that is beyond them. So a word is it's like an arrow. It's like a signpost. Say you're walking around a zoo and there's an arrow that says, kangaroos this way. The arrow is not the kangaroos. The kangaroos is what you find when you follow the arrows. And all words are like arrows. So the word, you say something like energy isn't actually energy. Energy is an arrow. The concept energy is an arrow pointing to some actuality that is non-verbal and completely indescribable. It's not nothing, but it's not simply energy. The dictionary definitions do not correspond to reality, do not correspond to actuality. And so you get that, language, the basic problem, this is kind of getting technical, but language is indicative, not definitive. If language was definitive, then words would mean what they're defined to be. But language is not definitive. Words don't mean the definitions of what the word means. Word means what the actuality that they indicate, which is completely beyond the concept of whatever the definition of the word is. So words are like URLs to real experience, which is not a concept. Real experience is not a concept, and words are essentially conceptual, or the definition of words are conceptual. So when you get that, then words don't trip you up, because you don't expect that thing, the realities, to really be what you're calling them. What you're calling them is just like a finger pointing. It's a way of saying that. It's an elaborate way of saying that. So you say, sense someone's energy, you're really saying that. This. So I'm sensing your energy, but it's not actually sensing, and it's not actually you, and it's not actually energy. But I'm doing it anyway, because the actuality doesn't conform to the words I'm using to indicate it.
It's that.
Yeah. It is what it really is, whatever that is, and that cannot be said.
Question about another word. On your website and in the description of this retreat, you use the word transmission.
Yes.
So a few questions. What is transmission? What is being transmitted? And should I be wearing protection?
Okay. Transmission is what's between the engine and the wheels. Those questions, again, are unanswerable. I would say that probably the simplest way to describe what transmission is immersion in the actuality of what experience actually is, which can seem to occur in the context of an event like this, or it can seem to occur in various ways. But it's a kind of it's an actualizing immersion. So as a result of that contact, something that may have seemed less actual and more theoretical can seem to become more concrete and more immediate, in whatever way that it does. And in terms of protection, buy everywhere. So that's a question for you to answer.
Do you see, and going back to a word we just talked about, do you see any sort of energetic exchange that happens between you and other people?
Yeah, but I don't know if I'd put it in those terms. I mean, spiritual engagement is genuine and palpable and can be powerful, but exactly what's happening, if anything, is I don't know if it can be said. I mean, in my own experience, I credit my own, my spiritual progress or whatever entirely to transmission. But I can't say what that means, or I can't prove it or demonstrate it. But I can say experientially, for me, it's self-validated actuality. And I know what I mean by that, and I know what it is from having been through it. On the receiving end, so to speak. Not that there's necessarily an actual receiving end and an actual giving end. That's part of the difficulty of parsing the whole thing. I mean, basically what it gets down to is spiritual, something amazing can happen in the context of spiritual engagement. Which can be summed up under these kinds of notions. But like anything else, you can't really pin it down.
The whole notion of validation is curious. I mean, that you would ever have to validate what this is. That's right in front of you.
Well, sure. No, for sure.
The things that are begging for validation are also all those things that we end up making up, like theories and abstract terms.
I mean, I guess by validation, I mean the relative subjective weight something seems, or actuality something seems to convey, or whatever. To speak very vaguely, sloppily.
In talking to friends who may not understand or have a relationship with any of what this is, they're the ones who want validation for what I might say, or at times might not say.
But to me, it's meaningful to talk about validation, because as one comes to this stuff, one comes to appreciate how palpably self-verifyingly actual it is, as opposed to theoretical or intuitively meaningful, but what the fuck kind of thing. You can get to the point. Wow, this is for real. This actually is like this. Amazing. Who'd have thought? Which is kind of you could say kind of a validation.
Well, I think you end up turning yourself inside out.
Oh,
that's a process, as it were.
Yeah,
the inside becomes the outside, and the outside just becomes this little inside.
Yeah. The tiger has become a puddle of butter, like little black salmon.
God, I haven't thought of that one for decades. I guess that was me old.
I just thought of that.
Yeah, that's right. I think one of the things that's been sort of on my mind recently, or at least through my experiences, is how much most of the conversations end up to be about something that's cognitive, but I become much more, I guess, attenuated to the power of things like instinct and emotion, just how much that seems to, just control my world. And in those times, I think, why should I care? So what? But they're just so compelling, more compelling, I think, than the cognition side is anymore for me.
Sure.
They're big question marks. I sort of see the emptiness in all the ideas and the abstractions.
Yeah.
It's maybe because of my work, though, too. But it's the other stuff that just seems, wow, so real.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, all cognition is like a movie set. It's all facade. It's all, it's a pretense of coherence, and you look around and there's nothing really there, or not much, very sketchy at best. But again, it's in the context of this luscious, this rich, palpable actuality that is so, so multi-valued and so vital.
Well, especially among people where that's pretty serious stuff, concepts and ideas and labels and smart. But
even in that context, most of that is like a game piece for their underlying emotionality and their underlying, status orientation and their underlying emotional energies. So it's a kind of a superficial stance.
Yeah.
Even in the case of those of us who aren't, who are largely aware of identifying our functioning in our relationship to rationality and to intellect, in actuality, our engagement with each other and with the environment is full of all sorts of irrational, and intuitive, and emotional energies. Whether it's acknowledged or not doesn't make it any more or less so the case. We're experience and participate in relationship as a full body contact sport, you could say, full energy spectrum engagement. And in the case of whether you're aware of it or not. I mean, all this spirituality stuff is just really about becoming aware of all that, all these other aspects that we're not used to paying attention to, perhaps.
So why is this experience of sitting here with you much more powerful than looking at your videos at my house?
I don't know. What would you think about that?
Because in the past I have almost never been to an actual person talking like this. I've been listening to Krishnamurti videos a lot, but that was after he passed away. And so I've been reading books of Ramana Maharshi after his shed of body. So, but then there seems to be something here I can't put my finger on that I can't seem to get by simply looking at the videos or listening to your videos.
Yeah, but yes, it's very interesting. I mean, it's very, it's very interesting, and that question is actually like a koan. It's like an invitation to look at that, to investigate the way in which there's more here than we're used to being able to sort out, make sense of, or acknowledge. And this is palpable to whatever degree, and actual to whatever degree. And so that's an eye opener. It's like, oh, interesting.
And that's what I was calling energy.
Yeah, no, for sure. Peter, you had?
Yeah, I did have a question, maybe related. Earlier, you were talking about kind of changing your relationship to pain, that instead of kind of pushing it away, you explore it and look at it. And then you kind of said that with emotional pain, it's more complicated. But it seems to me that it's probably true that principle should apply to any sense of dissatisfaction with life. That maybe you could actually feel that in your body sense and explore it in the same way that you explore pain.
No, I'm sure. It's really a matter of how readily accessible that is. I mean, to me, I think of a physical pain as such an immediate and obvious actuality, whereas emotional pain can again, in my experience, seem to be kind of vague and involving a lot of layers and complexities. But no doubt that's the case, of course.
Yeah. Then the question is, how do you do that without devolving into New Age mumbo jumbo?
Well, that's the question with everything. How do you have breakfast without devolving into New Age mumbo jumbo? The never-ending conundrum. God spare me from being a New Ager. Here I am giving spiritual talks. Oh no, somebody shoot me. Yeah.
What effect do you feel, just we're having this discussion about transmission, that the group, us agreeing to come together here, if there was an us, but isn't that a bit what you're talking about?
Absolutely, it's palpable. I mean, in any setting, certainly in any interpersonal exchange, or any interpersonal presence, there's just a symphony of qualities that are manifest to various degrees, that are all meaningful and all profound and all being engaged in with consciousness or unconsciousness or what have you. Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is just a part and parcel aspect of the richness and complexity and profundity of experience itself. I mean, and perhaps it's most explicit in interpersonal kind of context, because we as humans are perhaps very, sensitive to the human milieu and the human sort of bandwidth. But even being in an environment or being with objects, you get the same thing, where there's these flavors and qualities that are just permeative. That are again, it's palpable, and it's nonverbal presence that is just, it's luscious, really.
Could you repeat that question, because I couldn't hear the whole thing?
I don't know if I could.
Oh.
The question was about,
The group.
yeah, that in terms of transmission, not just transmission in the sense of the presence of me or per se, but the presence of anyone or people or a group or just the whole flavor, the whole composite, the whole stew.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything presents a sort of I don't know, you could call it a gestalt of flavor, right? I mean.
What is it? We got back to a what or why, but that draws it to be looking at it.
Yeah.
That's a kind that is fun, and it's sort of a special little grouping of a sort, but it's still but it just seems that even calling it spiritual, which sometimes turns me off, and it's kind of new agey. But at the same time, there is nothing other than that.
Right.
What you're saying, of course.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's all, the whole thing, everything is this. Experience itself is this. Experience is reality looking at / for itself, right? I mean, just going out into life and engaging in qualities and activities and engagements is ultimately, the reality of your being investigating itself and exploring its possibilities and so on and so forth. And this is just a particular case of that. And as you say, calling it spiritual and all that is basically a bill of goods. It's basically a marketing ploy, or what have you. It's an arbitrary way of characterizing something. As opposed to a political meeting, it's a spiritual meeting.
But what got us here, instead of fighting it out in the gutter outside the bar, which is equally it.
Absolutely.
I love what you say there, because it excites something that feels so apparent.
Well, it's individual nature. People that are of a certain temperament, who are at a certain point in their unfoldment or demise or what have you, may find themselves drawn to, more explicitly this kind of a discourse or investigation or what have you. It's a quirk of temperament or a quirk of, the stage of life or what have you. Right?
Or we're just bad fighters.
Yeah, lazy. Maybe we're good fighters and we haven't found out yet. It's early days yet. The brawling hasn't begun. Yeah, it's sure. I mean, again, that's sort of an open question. It's a koan. What is it? What's up with this? What's happening? Why are you here? Why am I here? And that's a good question. Not that it has an answer, but it's like a koan. It's like there's a profundity there of just, well, what is this? What is this?
Well, I guess there's also something that all of these people must be old souls, because they're searching for this, and yet simultaneously there's no old or young, or it's all here.
Yeah.
But I'm just kind of curious, and gee, why are we here together wanting this instead of sitting in a movie theater, which is equally cool too?
Yeah, no, for sure. Who knows? I mean, the question isn't answerable, but it is observable that seems to happen sometimes. On the other hand, you can frequently find me in a movie theater eating popcorn, so go figure.
Okay, so here I go with another word again. Being seems to connote individual, like one's being.
Does it?
Could be getting all my words mixed up, but it seems being, like a being, or being as a verb,
Right?
consciousness, level of awareness. Seems to suggest or imply individual.
But these are all logical structures, and you're using logic to imply other logic. And where does that tie into actuality? Where does that
That's
tie
where I
into?
was hoping you would come in. That's where.
Well, why don't we start the other way around? Why don't we start with actuality and then see what that implies?
Okay.
So here we have this, the presence of your experience. That's actuality, right? What does that imply? What does the presence of your experience imply? Just looking at it, not thinking about it, just feeling it. Here it is. What is it? What's the implication? Where does that go to?
Is this?
Is this? Pretty much says it all. And you get your levels and your consciousness and your beings and your individuals and everything all just in that. Right?
Be in that. Yeah, that's where I get it all tumbled around. It's all in that, and I think it's, in my ordinary mind, I think it's the other way around.
Exactly. We, human semantic structure has everything asked backwards.
So
Your experience is the actuality, and all differentiations are in that. So all nouns and all verbs occur in your experience, not the other way around. So if you're looking for the world, you look for the world in your experience. You don't look for your experience in the world. You're looking for beings. You look for beings in your experience. Don't go looking for your experience in beings. It's a matter of seeing what's actual. What is actual is what's undeniable. What's undeniably actual, and that is the presence of this experiencing, which as far as I can tell is my experiencing, and that says it all as far as I can tell. So I'm assuming if you exist, the same would be, you could say the same for yourself, but that's your problem.
I like that.
Having it asked backwards, though, doesn't mean any reduction in radiance.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not. It's just holding it in an awkward perspective that is unnecessarily complex.
And confusing.
Yeah. It's like thinking that the earth revolves around the sun is really complex and confusing. When you get that the sun revolves around the earth, it all gets very simple.
Is there any difference in the way you use the word noticing from the Buddhist mindfulness?
Yes, I think so. Because noticing is actually the inherent activity of experience, which is already ongoing. It's not something that you need to do or you cannot do. Whereas I think, I'm not certain, but I think that Buddhists apply mindfulness as an activity that one can deliberately engage in. Whereas noticing is the spontaneous self-engagement of experiencing, which is already always the case.
So in the Buddha's notion, mindfulness allows for awareness, which is effortless to be more deeper, wider.
Right.
And so would that be noticing and awareness?
No, well, maybe, but it's not exactly the same because I think the actuality of awareness is that it is always full. It can't be deepened. All you can do is notice how full it is. So the only way awareness can be less than full is by believing it's less than full and not letting yourself notice that it is actually not less than full. It can't be less than full, because the presence of experience is awareness. and experience is present completely, you know. And stupidity and lack of mindfulness and distraction happen in experience. So since it's in experience, then experience is actual, which means awareness is actual. So it can't be increased or decreased. All you can do is notice it. For example, I can say, I'm looking at you, so I'm noticing your face, but in actuality, I can also see the rest of the room. And I can pretend I'm not paying attention to it, so I'm not noticing it, but that's just semantics. Actually, I do notice it, or it wouldn't exist at all. The universe would just be your face, and it isn't. So in other words, the full field of my experience is always present, no matter how focused or distracted I am by some portion of it. And that presence of the full field of experience is awareness. So awareness is already full. It's just a question of acknowledging and appreciating that fact, which is what I call noticing. Noticing is noticing that noticing is already noticing. You could say. So it's, in other words, it's appreciating what is already inherently the case, rather than engaging in or achieving something new, or in a new way, or in an improved way. Because intelligence is already fully manifest. Awareness is already fully manifest. And by its very nature, it is miraculous and transcendental. So by simply noticing that fact, you get to discover that you are miraculous and transcendental, which is what constitutes enlightenment and liberation. But you haven't actually changed anything or done anything new. You're just noticing what's already the case, and you're coming to appreciate it. You know, like Ramana Maharshi said, you know, the self is already realized. You are the self, this is the self. Just stop pretending it's not.
What is there, I mean, I can't see anything beyond seeing or noticing.
Of course,
I mean,
there's nothing.
what's kind of literally mind-blowing is that the world seems to appear like so busy and complicated, and yet what is there besides noticing?
Yeah, nothing. This is it. How weird is that?
It's really beautiful.
It's really beautiful.
Oh my God, it's just so.
It's really beautiful, really weird, really jaw-dropping.
Yeah.
And convenient for the lazy spiritual practitioner.
Yeah. Speaking for myself, I can say that. If they don't come much lazier than me, so.
But you said there's a difference between saying I'm being and noticing and experiencing and actually noticing and experiencing. And so there's a way we can perhaps delude ourselves in such a formless non-practice, the same way we can delude ourselves in such a form-ridden practice.
Sure.
Could you speak to that?
It's really a matter of acknowledging what actually is, the way it actually is, rather than relating to concepts or relating to pretenses or aspirations. You know, when you notice, well, you know, how is my experience present? How can this be? How can this be present? How can all this intelligence be here? How can this consciousness be here? How can this awareness be here? Effortlessly, just bang, just here. It's miraculous, it's just appearing. And the whole world, all of the universe is just appearing. How can this happen? And when you appreciate, when you look at that and you see, well, this is really here. This is really whatever it is, and it's really amazing. Then that's noticing and appreciating what actually is the case. And so in that appreciation, you get to inhabit it, you get to enjoy it, you get to partake of the flavor of that, the quality of that, as opposed to holding it as a concept or an aspiration, where it's like a carrot on a string, or something up there that's like it's like that. I know, which is nice in the sense that you're aspiring to something wonderful. But by aspiring to something wonderful and not acknowledging the wonderfulness that you have, you're not enabled to take advantage of and enjoy the wonderfulness you have, which of course is much more powerful and palpable because it has the authority of actually being there. It has the power of being genuine rather than being, something you're aspiring to or you're, wishing for. I mean, most religion is basically wish. I don't think most Christians really believe that Christ is God and he's running everything and everything's okay. I think it's kind of a, wouldn't it be nice if? I don't know. But the spirituality that counts is spirituality of actuality. The nature of what really is the powerful basis for spirituality, for fulfillment. If it isn't actual, how can it be useful to you? How can it be, enjoyable? How can it be powerful? So you look at what actually is, and you discover that what actually is astounding and amazing and incredible, and you actually already are that. And wow, how nice! And then you have genuine spirituality that you are living, you're inhabiting it, rather than trying to create it or wanting it or hoping for it or
So somewhere, must be some other thing I read. There's this notion, and maybe I'm not going to say it right. I feel a real love for the beauty of nature, the beauty of what I call the external world.
Sure.
And I don't know, somewhere there's something in my head that says, what does it say? Well, this is way simplified, but that I'm externalizing or that I'm, distracting. I don't think it's correct, but I know that it's kind of somewhere back in my head and I just kind of like to.
Why all the qualifying? If there's beauty in it and you enjoy it, why not just rest in that? Why need to qualify it as this or that or?
Oh, because I read something somewhere that just.
Well, you're a concept girl, aren't you?
Dreadfully. Dreadfully. Yeah.
And concepts are fine, but just notice that concepts are existing and are present in the context of your experience, which is not conceptual. This that is present here, this presence of your experience is not a concept, is it?
Yeah.
So concepts are present in your experience, but there's a whole lot present in your experience is not a concept, right? All the color you're seeing, that's not a concept. All the sound you're hearing, that's not a concept. All the sensation you're feeling, that's not a concept. So concept exists, but it's a small, relatively small partiality in the field of your experience, which is not a concept. Experience is not conceptual. It's actual. It's that's why we're all here. That's what this is. If experience wasn't actual, no one would be here.
Seems like one of the trickiest things, like when you get caught up in this so-called spiritual, walking on a spiritual path or whatever, is this concept that thinking is something that needs to be banished. And it's kind of like I'm walking through the forest and I'm like, I love all these trees except that one. That tree I hate. That tree's gotta go. It's so fucking pointless because I can't stop it. I mean, it's just.
Well,
I don't know.
We've all been brainwashed with all this misinformation about everything. And any and all information we've been brainwashed with is misinformation, including most of what we characterize as spiritual. you know. And so, you know, that's the ever-present fact, you know, we always have this sort of shadow of our brainwashing that's just sort of, you know, that we carry around with us, and there it is. But again, even that exists in the context of this actuality, which is not brainwashing, which is not a theory, it's not a concept, it's actual. And so again, just tuning into this actuality from time to time, you know, actuality is more powerful than concepts, period, because it has the power of its own actuality, of its own self-verifying nature, whereas concepts at best are sketchy and need to be defended and need to have all sorts of supporting arguments and theory and stuff. So, again, the more you tune into experiencing itself just by feeling it, which is totally non-conceptual, you know, the more power you have of inhabiting that rather than inhabiting this imaginary world of our self-definition in our, you know, our conceptual world.
And it seems like one of the really curious properties of that is the all rightness of it, of when you tune into actuality, it's all right.
It's all right?
It's all right.
Well, it's all right.
Oh, no, that's, I need to scrub my
Yeah, no, I mean, actually, reality is integrative. It's okay. It's its own fulfillment, makes its own gravy. I mean, everything about it is answers all questions, crosses all T's and dots all I's.
They don't exist.
You know, and a lot of the dualistic thinking we've all been brainwashed in is, well, if I'm going to be spiritual, then I have to totally shut off this other part. It's not going to happen. You're always going to be your neurotic self. You're always going to be carrying around the shadows of your brainwashing. You're always going to be carrying around the nagging voices of your parents or whatever. You know, I mean, all this is just, but it doesn't matter because all of that is a part and an aspect of this vast wonderfulness. You know, and so when you notice that and appreciate that, it just becomes more and more and more self-evident. And so all that other stuff, so-called, just becomes less and less relevant. Who gives a shit?
Okay, so here, but as it becomes less relevant, it may drop off.
May or may not, who cares?
Who cares?
It'll do what it does. If it does.
Yeah, so I see this part of me that, I mean, there's a striving right there. Like, I'd like to, this part that wants to be bothered by less things.
Sure, all that's great, but any striving that's in you is actually your own life force, questing out for itself, reaching for its own fullness. And it does so under its various guises that it fixates on as being relevant at the time, none of which are accurate necessarily. But because it is your life force reaching out, it is real. But the reality that it is the reality of the presence of your experiential field, which is the totality of your life force. So this is why, by feeling the presence of your experiential field, all of that becomes satisfied without needing to embark on these little quixotic quests of trying to solve this problem or achieve this or get rid of this.
I need to understand that last sentence you just said. I don't remember what it was.
Okay. No, by feeling the presence of this, you're feeling the totality of your life force. And so these partialized aspirations of your life force, if you're trying to do this or trying to do that, become fulfilled in the fullness of this. And so they become, again, they fall away as being less relevant. Your life force is like a light that's trying to shine out in your karma. And your karma is pretending to be this big encasement with little cracks in it, and the light's shining through these cracks. And so you're seeing that these cracks as your opportunities of, oh, I'm trying to do this and trying to do that and trying to do the other. But when you feel the presence of your experience, you discover that there is no encasement. There is no cracks. There's just the light shining of your life force. And so all these little side projects become less relevant. Because you have the whole field right here, and its presence is its own fullness, even as an ongoing self-engagement, as an ongoing seeking. But it's a total field seeking, not a specialized, trying to do this and trying to do that thing.
So talking about the thought, sometimes it would happen to me quite often. And sometimes the thought is getting very, very light, very little thought.
Sure.
So in that time, I really see what the thought is about.
Sure.
There's coming, there's nowhere, it doesn't go anywhere, and it disappeared, as soon as it's occurred. So that helped me quite a bit to free up from those beliefs. So it is still relevant, even with less thought. But that is not my achievement. It's just what happens.
Sure. I mean, this presents itself with a continually shifting predominance of whatever modes are present. Sometimes you're more heavy in thought, sometimes you're more heavy in emotion, sometimes sensation, whatever. I mean, however you would characterize it. And so, just through surfing this dynamism of these morphing presences, you can kind of take advantage of whatever seems to be available. And again, if your thought seems to be particularly light, you can kind of look through it and see, oh, look, that's cool. Look at this about thought, and notice it a little specially, and so on. So you can kind of take advantage of these different modes when they present themselves. Kind of like when it's nice out, you take advantage of it and go outside for a walk. So it's like you make hay while the sun shines. So you opportunistically take advantage of whatever states your experience seems to present as predominantly, and then work with whatever is most easy to work with in whatever mode it seems to be present.
Which might be not thinking.
Sure, it might be not thinking, it might be getting really pissed off, whatever. And there's no formula, it's you just follow your inspiration and screw around, you try things, you experiment, you flail around, and your intelligence stumbles on things, and every now and then you get a home run.
I mean, there is some wisdom to, past masters and some of the things that they've talked about and pointed to. I know you're not a big lover of meditation, but it's very comfortable for me just to be quiet and sit still.
Oh, sure. Meditation is great. I have no problem with meditation. What I have a problem with is dutiful or formalized or, repetitive scheduled meditation.
Yeah, and I shouldn't use the word meditation, I mean really contemplation, but just being quiet.
Yeah.
Just slowing things down a bit.
No, for sure. That's great. I'm a big fan of that.
But I do know people particularly mathematicians, who just love thinking.
No, for sure.
Love working those problems.
Yeah. Again, there's no hierarchy of modes. There's no mode that is intrinsically worse or better than any other mode. Intellect is fine. Emotion is fine. Sensory experience is fine. It's all good. Subtle energy phenomena is fine. It's all great. And different temperaments, different modes, different karmic natures have different strengths and different weaknesses and different things that you predominate towards. And you work with what you got. You play the hand that was dealt you. And everyone's unique. So one size does not fit all. That's why method and formula is absurd. So because each individual has their own ideal method and formula, and the trick is for them to stumble onto it in accordance with your own nature and your own proclivities and your own aptitudes and strengths and so on. Play to your strengths. Find what you're good at and hit on that. It's about 3:30. I don't know how toasted you all are getting. We could either take a 5-minute break and go a little while more, or we can knock off or whatever. I know, these day-long things can be kind of grueling, and it's really down to your own individual burnout level in terms of how you're feeling. But is there any consensus? Anyone want to knock off? Anyone want to go a little while longer? We could, take a 10-minute break and come back for another half hour or something. Does that feel good?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And if you'd like to knock off, take off, feel free. And we'll resume tomorrow around 10.
In the nature of just getting tired, are we supposed to be effortless in listening to you? Like when you said, be sincere, does that imply effort?
It doesn't matter. Whatever seems natural to you, whatever your own inclination is. Effort is fine, but even if you're being effortful, the trick is to also be open to other aspects. So not to have all your eggs in one basket, not to be just one mode of engagement, but try to be as open as you can to everything. You can be relaxed and dreamy, you can be very focused and attentive, and it just doesn't matter, whatever seems natural.
So people's natures are different, how they do with it.
Entirely.
Yeah.
So everyone's a one-off. So why don't we take 5-10 minutes and stretch, and we'll get back together for a little while.
Where'd they go?
Yeah, that's
Everyone else goes to Joshua Tree.
I don't know.
Would be good.
I don't know. I can't say. So now I'm gonna send an email to Peter. To send
Actually, if you send them on me, I will send to the organizer, Pam. And Pam, then just, well, you know what, I will send it to you. You have a friend. No. And the
Or just giving the emails to somebody else and nothing else.
But that's the way it is. That's always the way it is. If you, I'm sure there are people coming from the Bay Area, and they have to go to except the people in the morning. Thank you. They drive. But for other people, they all.
Yep.
And, if you can find that was the wonderful source, and to ask them, just to send out and see what was their response. Because they don't want to share time, that's all. I don't think they would exist, or, yeah.
I'll send it to you. Talk to people down in LA, maybe there are people there, and fly into, what is that little place?
No, the best way to do it is to fly at the same time with the Bay Area. Yeah, to arrive at a similar time, then you can take a class or rent a car together. Like I said, she is professional because sometimes the registration for her, I don't know who's going to register or not, but I'm sure there will be some.
So we done, or is it partially done?
Well, it's gonna come back. 5 days, the rest are for 5 days.
Okay, there's a few of us remaining. For the hardcore.
So it's a good thing, actually.
I'm gonna try to.
No. Just asking if there's more. Oh, no. Another half hour.
No, but that's too bad they didn't make that open. That'd be great. Oh, yeah, right there. Yeah, did fail. It's 30%. Oh, so
Like a church said.
It's not a matter of disease, it's already all those spots right up. Well, yeah, because I gotta reload them again.
Here's a regular.
Nah, okay.
Put it in the back.
No, right? Subscribe.
You would have done it, you just flail on the floor. That was extreme, you needed the base, sorry about that.
Somebody say earlier, as close as you get, just, and that was my high. And so that we get, just beyond what I reach. But it was, if I ever hit that button, it was really cool. It's like, oh. And that was so this is kind of anticipated, I guess I'm okay that I didn't get like the button now. Because that's what I was. Well, that's what I came out, that's what I think I maybe understand today.
Yeah.
Is the.
Unless you want to be. Two.
It's kind of high.
It's not just even research.
Since you actually have people.
Yeah,
Uncertainty usually means you have a formula, you just don't know what your coefficients are.
more expensive.
Not really.
I find it recognized just to maintain a bunch of theories, walls, possibilities, about life, and it's available, random access.
Yeah.
You mentioned
Yeah, it's like everything else.
Man, I'm so wasted. I'm gonna go home and sleep.
Yeah, you're tired of stuff. What were you doing?
Huh?
Did you get enough sleep last night?
I guess not, I woke up too early.
What time did you?
5. Don't go lay out.
And that's always the case. And
Then how about this year?
Is anything else happening?
Well, Peter's gonna go back and he's gonna kind of lay it. He's gonna lay it off. He's gonna go back to Stephen's house. Stephen and his wife are going out. So Peter's just gonna stay there.
one of the,
Perhaps, he usually takes a nap after His sleep is never. I actually usually try to. Sometimes I miss it, but, yeah, so I'm gonna make an announcement, tell everybody to take their cups. Don't buy them. There's actually a trash can. I just got an idea, why don't you just take the damn garbage can and put it in there? Instead of keep taking things over there. Well, here's the garbage can here. It was in the kitchen, so I just brought it in here. I said, yeah, screw it, I'm just leaving it go anyway. I said, what's it there?
Sure you can.
Everyone like that stuff.
Oh, they sucked it up, it was gone for 2 hours.
Hey, buddy. What are you doing?
Imaginary fan?
You say you fly out tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow evening, after the talk. I'm from here to the airport.
I want to plan a little extra time. It's like a graduation tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
A little full up.
Right.
Mike, are you staying in town tonight, coming back tomorrow?
I'm driving down to Tacoma to stay with my brothers. Where you say?
At 10 minutes, so east, I think.
That's
Southwest. That's why we got an Airbnb.
Yeah, I figured that out.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's, I thought it was.
We should.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny, in your email, I can send you my info.
Mine is, Mike, yeah, Mike
Just a second.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, MIKE.
Is the young
RAYNOLBS. One word and it's A. That's email.com.
Peru or something do the, one of the ayahuasca. He is a great guy. Yeah, he is.
Between now and tomorrow.
Okay,
You ready? Out there, 40 pounds. I would, if the weather was close.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those cities that have all the details. Thank you.
Let's see if I can get it.
It's a small item.
Right.
I think we probably would.
Just auto corrected that. Okay, great. I'll send you our info.
Great, thanks.
So we're back. Another little code out on our day. Y'all have weathered this grueling day admirably.
That was the test, and now it's with the transmission ribbons.
One aspect of this that is particularly perplexing is it's always presenting continually with a paradox. And again, this piques the part of ourselves that fantasizes about resolving it into actually being this or that, or achieving some result of this and that. It always presents itself with the presence of actuality, unfathomable actuality, and at the same time it presents itself with seeming to be this or that, or these specific result or qualities, and we're always continually at that crossroads. And you take one fork or the other with the fantasy that's going to actually get you somewhere, and you find yourself, of course, still at the crossroads. So you're always at this, at a kind of a neither nor in terms of this actually settling into anything or not settling into anything or what have you. You know, the fantasy of, oh, I'm going to get rid of my personality or get rid of my conceptual thinking, and all of a sudden I'm going to open up and I'm just going to be this wonderful field of light. It's like, yeah, good luck. Because in actuality, it's always both and. You're always present with unfathomable, irrational presence, and at the same time always present with your version of things and your sense of yourself and your life and your history and your personality, and they're always right here.
So that whole notion of diminishing the ego, which again is a striving, kind of a big cornerstone of the Buddhist notion.
I mean, the supposition that anything is a problem, nothing needs to be changed. You just have to see what it is.
Okay.
I mean, in practice, that's the essential formula. It's not about changing anything. It's not about achieving anything or getting rid of anything. It's just about seeing what it is. And when you see what it is, it stops being a problem. You discover it's not a problem.
Can you talk a little bit about what your practices looked like prior to realization?
Everything. I flailed around like a maniac. like a man possessed. I tried everything. I mean everything.
So is it, I mean, oftentimes, at the end of playing around, so to speak, people have said that there is no merit to method to anything that involves getting better at. So is it that realization is actually just the realization that flailing around it doesn't help?
Essentially, yeah, it doesn't help, but it doesn't hurt. It's irrelevant. The realization consists of discovering that what this is complete in itself, is sufficient in itself, is transcendental in itself without needing to be made into something transcendental, without needing to be made special. Experience itself is inconceivably special. It's inconceivably miraculous. And simply noticing that fact is realization. We construct a very diminished fantasy of what it is. We think we're small, we think experience is small, we think our minds are small, when in actuality experience is vast, it's infinite, it's miraculous. And simply noticing that fact, of course, enables appreciation of that, enables living within limitlessness, living within miraculousness, which of course is the nature of realization.
So this noticing, so those fantasies that are in the way of noticing.
Yes.
Would you say that when you realize that the fantasies, therefore the flailing around, all of that, when you see the futility of that, you are noticing takes over?
Yes, but not so much. It's not so much about being free of the fantasies as noticing the context the fantasies occur in. Fantasizing will always occur. The imagination will always be spinning off fantasies. The mind will always be spinning off hypotheses. But the presence of experience, which is non-conceptual, exists outside of that context. And that's where the miraculousness is found. And so in that context, fantasizing and conceptualizing just become less relevant because they become very small activities within this incredible context, rather than being seemingly huge presences, which they may seem to be when you're lost in thought, lost in imagining. You know, I think people have, you know, I would say, consensus reality mindset of human beings is largely very mentally oriented. People put themselves right into their concept of what they are and their concept of what the world is. And in actuality, that concept is very small, and their experiential field is very large, is vast. And when one discovers that fact, when you discover the smallness of fantasy and the smallness of mind and the vastness of experience, the true proportion just becomes obvious, and the center of gravity shifts. Rather than feeling like you're stuck in your concepts, you're in this amazing, slippery, unresolvable actuality, and concepts and imagination are just very small events that are ongoing within that.
So
it's a matter of proportion, in other words.
So this point of noticing, does that happen at the end of an illusion?
It happens any time, because even in the midst of illusion, there is noticing. Because noticing is always the actual event. experience is always multidimensional in real time. It always is that. So even when you're lost in a fantasy, you're lost in delusion, in an instant, say you're just lost in whatever, in some tunnel vision, and that's occurring in the midst of the full field of experience, which by its very nature is an engagement with infinity, you could say. So that's always available. The question is just to stumble upon it, to find yourself appreciating it, to find yourself noticing it. And it's not necessarily something you can do deliberately or consciously, but nonetheless it is possible. And knowing that it's possible and having experience of doing that previously makes it easier. So you one builds up, one stumbles into it and then builds up momentum, builds up facility with that mode, with letting go into non-conceptual experience in any context, because it's always present.
And is intellectual articulation important in any way to this stumbling upon once and then later, or does that kind of happen on its own?
Intellectual what?
So articulation.
Oh, no, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter one way or the other. It's not a plus or a minus. Because mental functioning is a very small event. If you take an inventory of your experience in real time, you'll notice, the presence of experience, the field of vision, field of hearing, field of, all these various things, the mental field of thought, maybe imagination, maybe or whatever, but all of this field is there, and thought is not very large. It's not very big. It's not very dominant. Even though, again, most modern people perhaps, spend a lot of their orientation fixated on that. It's as if I was walking around like this all the time. It's like my hand is so big. My hand is so big. It's not that the hand is big. It's that I have it right here. And our thought is a lot like that, because most of experience is nonverbal. Most of experience is non-conceptual. Light is not a concept. Color is not a concept. Sound is not a concept. These are experiential textures, which are completely not mental. And the experiential field is full of all of these flavors and qualities and textures, that aren't qualifiable, that are not conceptual, they're not mental. And so the mental bandwidth, so to speak, is relatively small bandwidth. And when you notice that, then you notice it, you begin to appreciate it. It stops. So even if I'm thinking, it's like, okay, that's happening, but so is all the rest of this, and so what? Because no portion of the experiential bandwidth gets in the way of any other portion. When I'm thinking, it doesn't block vision. It doesn't block hearing. All these things occur in their own dimensions, so they don't impede, they don't get in the way of each other. They happen kind of in their own space or whatever.
So oftentimes we find ourselves like in the midst of a dialogue and then say something like, oh, Peter Brown kind of described this like this. And so in that sense, I'm kind of thinking, is there any value to this whole process, like taking homework away from this day?
Possibly. Again, you have to work with your own inspiration and see what works. And anything can be a jumping off point, or anything can be a stumbling block. So it's less about what you're working with than how well you work with it. You see what I mean? In other words, you can write down important sayings of somebody, and then you can spend your time thinking, considering them, or meditating on them, or you can just forget it all. And either method can be productive, or either method can keep you stuck. You know what I mean? Because it's more how artfully and how intelligently you engage with it than what it is you're engaging with. And it's sort of your temperament. Some people are more methodical. Some people like to figure things out, and other people have other strengths. So find out what your what works for you, is find out what sort of what seems to make you more stuck, and try and emphasize what seems to be freeing for you, and don't worry so much about what seems to grab hold of you. I mean, some people who are thinkers are overthinkers, and for a person like that, it might be to an advantage to be with color or be with sound, listen to music or something, because they're tying themselves in knots with their thinking. Or maybe the other way around. Maybe someone's a very sharp analytical thinker, and that's an advantage. So again, you have to sort of explore your own process and explore your own strengths and find out where you get a little spark, where it seems to have a little opening.
So one is mental, like given to a lot of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
What would you suggest to do?
Well, it all depends. That can be a strength or a weakness or both. Again, it depends. It's not the thing itself, it's how artfully you work with it. With anything, it's a matter of of finding a way in which it's more than that. So if you can be with thought, and the thought tends to open into more possibility, that's great. But if you're with thought and it tends to try and get more structural and more locked in, then maybe you should, or one should explore an alternative. Sort of whether it feels like it's closing you in, or it feels like it's a jumping off point, a diving board into something else, something new.
But wouldn't thought kind of trick us into thinking this opening up when it's actually closing down?
Yeah, sure. It's always that. It's always a possibility. I mean, it's always very slippery. One has to be very artful.
I mean, everything goes in both directions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's always, again, you're always at that crossroads. You're always, it's not like you're going away from being closed into openness. You're always sort of doing both. So it's always very paradoxical. Again, it's not about trying to achieve something. It's just see what's present. And whatever's present, there's always more than you're seeing. Whatever you're seeing is more. So see that more, and then see more than that, and then see more than that. Because the present experiential field is infinite, literally infinite. And if you notice that, it's directly experienceable, it's appreciable as being infinite. And so letting yourself notice that, wow, I mean, just, you're gone.
Could you explore more about when you face this crossroad? What is advantage or
no advantage?
What to do?
Know what to do. Just how it is. It's always that way.
I know one of your advice is there's no better version of anything. There's no better things, anything. So, but still, this crossroad, I can easily trip over.
Yeah, don't worry about it. The point of that is simply we always have a fantasy that we can actually go one way or another, achieve something. Not going to happen. You can't actually make a choice. You can't actually achieve anything. You're always in a question of position of where am I? And the fantasy is I'm always going to get somewhere. I'm going to get somewhere. There's nowhere to get. So you're always here, and it's where am I? I don't know. I'm going to go there. Okay, go there. And where am I now? I don't know.
You keep thinking that there's like some sort of endpoint.
No.
None.
The end point is discovering that there's no end point.
Yeah.
That's the real end point. Realization is discovering that there's no realization. That's the truth. This is it. It always has been. It's a big joke.
It really is. It's frustrating as hell. On the other hand, it's immensely free.
Yeah.
So are there any innate qualities that create fecundity or fertile ground, like curiosity, playfulness, creativity?
Yeah, well, the point, you already have all that, though. You don't need to create fecundity. You have fecundity. This is fecundity. So again, it's just letting yourself appreciate it, letting yourself be, feel it, be open, feel the lusciousness of life. The lusciousness of experience is fecundity, and it's always luscious. So just drinking experience, drinking the fullness, the incredible, Experience is like a symphony. It's like an inconceivably beautiful, complex, horrible symphony. And it's just, you're just continually being washed in it. And just float back in that, drink that incredible lusciousness. And there's you can't get any more fecund than that. That's it, really. And it's already that. So it's just a matter of just like let go, let go into the hot tub of experience and dig it,
Earlier you mentioned, talking about how this is infinite, and trying to see what you see, then see there's more, then see there's more. But I find, I guess the way I'm hearing that is seeing different elements of experience. But I find the more I try to pick out things, the more I get tied up.
Right. It's not more quantitatively, like it's not more additionally. It's more in terms of other dimensions, other subtle realms, even other subtle flavors. And the way in which that's so can't really be described. You just sort of stumble onto it. It's like feeling the richness or the bottomlessness of experience. So you be with whatever you're experiencing as whatever it is, and then just feel the way in which there's more than that there. And it may just be an innuendo or just sort of a feeling of something. It can be very vague. It's not important. And again, we were talking, we haven't, I said earlier, we actually haven't spent much time with this today. I think maybe we'll do some more tomorrow. That the kind of auto-suggestion or hypnotic modes is the basic way in which consciousness orients itself within the experiential field, which is the way we tie ourselves in knots, but we can also use this to our advantage. It can be a technique we can use to explore. And so you can literally say to yourself, okay, whatever I'm seeing, I'm using seeing here, but it's in any experiential context, doesn't matter what. Whatever you're seeing, you can just tell yourself, there's more here, there's much more here. And then just sort of pretend that there is, don't even, just, there is more, and then just feel the more that is there. And don't worry about whether you're playing a game with yourself or whatever. Just assume that there is more and assume that you can be with it, and then just do it anyway. So again, this is not rational and it's not logical, but if you play with this, you may stumble onto the way in which it's vital and actually powerful.
Am I getting what you're saying by saying it's just sort of like diffusing attention? Attention is very focused, and then
you can play that. That's one mode you can play with. Absolutely. I mean, the nature of attention experience tends to coalesce into a focus, which dances around and is dynamic in various ways. But when any focus is present, the rest of the field that is relatively less in focus is also present, and you can attend to it. So I can be looking at you, paying attention to your face, and I can be seeing the blue shirt over there in the field, or I can be seeing the full field of vision even while I'm looking at you, or I can sort of relatively collapse my awareness and just be aware of your face and much less aware of the full field. It never actually goes away. But again, this is kind of a sort of a quasi-hypnotic kind of mode of you just sort of pretend you can do it and then you do it. And yeah, this kind of investigation can be really interesting, because again, you're discovering, you're letting yourself play with the ways in which things are one way or another. There's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of alternatives that coexist. A lot of modes that coexist that are quite different than each other. And yet, because they're all there, they sort of opens the range of possibilities, or the sort of the field of possible engagement or whatever. But, just play with it. You play with it, you try anything, just screw around with your experience. Experience is so much fun, and it's so slippery, and the nature of the way we work, we tend to find the default mode and just more or less sort of be that way, whatever that is, with whatever degree of looseness or tightness our temperament tends to gravitate towards. But whatever mode you normally go to, there's other modes that are also available, and simply by sort of pushing your own envelope and stumbling onto those and playing with those, your own possibilities of normalcy sort of loosen up and open up a little bit, and you feel that it's palpable, because again, this stuff isn't all conceptual. There's a kind of a hypnotic, self-virtualizing felt sense. When you feel stuck in your life, like in the normal so-called deluded person living their life, and they're stuck in their life and their crappy karma and their history and their little body in the big objective world. All of that is a felt sense that is being actualized by a kind of hypnotic, patent template or something that's being held in imagination or whatever, right? And likewise, you can have the felt sense of openness, the felt sense of multiple dimensionalities, the felt sense of multiple simultaneous possibilities, which feels very different and palpably, not just as a concept or as something that you can play with, but something that actually becomes, a feeling of what you are, a feeling of where you are. And you feel yourself as this open, infinite field, rather than feeling yourself as a little closed, whatever, your body or, whatever your normal mode is. And all of these are kind of verified and created through experiential, actualization. What you hang out in sort of tends to reify itself as a kind of a normalcy. And it becomes kind of felt, again, through this kind of hypnotic thing or whatever.
That would be great to explore more tomorrow.
Sure. Yeah. Explore it anytime. It's all here. You don't need me.
At least for starters.
I'm just an agitator.
Yeah, that's what I need, an agitator. Rabble-rouse. My ordinary thinking.
Ultimately, they're both trends. The openness and the constrictedness.
They're both what?
Trends.
Trends?
Trends.
Trends.
Everything is trans.
Yeah.
Or nothing is trans. This has infinite modes that it can be with itself in, and it does. And it can hang out and stabilize itself seemingly, quasi, in various modes or mode or not. And it's just the sky's the limit. It's really a matter of push your own envelope and see what's possible, discover for yourself. But just because you're used to doing things a certain way doesn't mean it has to be that way, and doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. And you may be able to discover wildly other possibilities that are actually available, to your benefit or detriment. You might drive yourself nuts and end up in a loony bin for a while, but hey, it's all good, right? It's all part of the experiment.
Well, with Eckhart Tolle, and probably everyone has read something by him, he says his extreme anxiety was what kind of created that opening for him.
Anything can be a fulcrum. Anything can be a point of opening or of discovering possibility. I kind of feel like we've done a good job today. I feel like if we push it much more, we're all going to melt into puddles on the floor or whatever, metaphorically. So why don't we knock off, and I wish you a lovely evening, and we'll, if you're available and interested, we'll resume tomorrow around 10.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.